She met him when the snow was falling, and her heart was quietly breaking. It was supposed to be a holiday fling, a weekend carved out of loneliness and cocoa-stained hope. No last names, no promises, just two strangers warming each other against the cold. But then came the silence, then the screen, then him, kneeling before another woman, broadcast in glittering high definition. And just like that, everything she'd almost believed in shattered like ice beneath her feet. But what happens when the past doesn't stay buried in the snow? And what if love, real love, isn't lost in what happened, but found in what comes after? Welcome to Stories Box, where every tale unlocks a new world. From heartwarming journeys to thrilling adventures, dive into stories that stay with you long after the last word. Subscribe, sit back, and step into a story, because the best moments begin with once upon a time. The first snow of December drifted down like powdered sugar across the sleepy mountain town of Pinebrook. Twinkling fairy lights clung to rooftops, wreaths hung on cafe doors, and the scent of cinnamon and roasted chestnuts floated on the crisp winter air. It was the kind of place that looked like it belonged on the cover of a Christmas card, unreal, idyllic, and just remote enough to feel like the rest of the world didn't exist. Isla Collins didn't usually run away from her life, but this year was different. She had boarded the train from Boston 3 days ago with a duffel bag, a puffer coat, and a need for silence. Pinebrook promised everything her life didn't. No deadlines, no meetings, no heartbreak. Just her, a rented cottage, and whatever peace she could find in between mugs of peppermint tea and pages of her half-finished poetry book. She wasn't expecting to meet anyone, especially not someone like him. It started at the bakery on Main Street. She had ducked in to escape a sudden flurry. Cheeks pink from the cold, fingers still wrapped around a coffee to go. The bakery smelled of sugar cookies and warm butter. And as she stood in line, her eyes wandered to the man ahead of her. He was laughing with the elderly cashier, that kind of genuine belly laugh that warmed the room more than the fireplace behind him. He wore a charcoal gray coat and had a navy scarf wrapped haphazardly around his neck. When he turned slightly, Isla caught a glimpse of his profile. Sharp jaw, dark hair, 5 o'clock shadow. He looked like a movie star, pretending not to be one. And then he turned fully, meeting her eyes for just a second. "Cold out there, huh?" he said, offering a smile that could melt glaciers. She blinked, freezing. "First time in Pinebrook?" She nodded. "Is it that obvious?" "It's either that or you're the first local I've ever seen order a peppermint latte in July." She looked down at the Festive cup in her hand and laughed, realizing the mistake. "Habit." He stepped aside, letting her move ahead in line. "I'm Jack, by the way. Jack Whitmore." "Isla," she replied, sliding her gloves off and placing her order. They chatted while she waited for her drink. Jack had a way of making it seem like she wasn't a stranger. He asked about her poetry, noticed a notebook tucked under her arm, and even offered to show her a quiet lake trail he swore was better than therapy. "You're a tourist too?" she asked. Jack hesitated. "Something like that. I come here when I need to disappear." It wasn't much of an answer, but something about it resonated with her. Disappearing sounded exactly like what she needed to. That afternoon, they walked through snow-dusted trails just outside town. Jack showed her the frozen lake, the footbridge where teenagers carved their initials, the old wooden bench with L plus T 1954 still etched into its spine. "It's magic here," Isla murmured, her breath fogging the air. Jack nodded. "That's why I keep coming back. The rest of the world is too loud." He was easy to talk to. Isla surprised herself with how much she told him. About her recent breakup, the publishing deal that fell through, the way her friends expected her to bounce back like it was nothing. Jack listened, really listened, with none of the performative sympathy she was used to. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer cliches. He just walked beside her in the snow, hands in his coat pockets, eyes steady and kind. They spent the rest of the day together, had dinner at the inn's restaurant, laughed over bad Christmas movies, and walked the empty streets of Pinebrook under a sky full of stars. When he walked to the cottage she'd rented, he paused at the gate. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked. She hesitated for only a second. "I'd like that." And she did. The days that followed blurred into something dreamlike. Mornings with coffee and snow angels. Afternoons with spontaneous hikes and shared stories. Evenings curled up by the fire with hot chocolate, the only sound between the crackle of wood and quiet music on the old radio. Isla didn't ask too many questions, and neither did he. They lived in the now. No pasts, no futures. Just here. Just this. Still, some things she couldn't help noticing. Like how Jack's phone would vibrate, but he never answered. Or how he flinched once when a woman recognized him on the street, calling him Mr. Whitmore before he smiled politely and slipped away. She Googled his name once, half out of curiosity, half out of instinct. Nothing came up. No Instagram. No LinkedIn. No trace of a man who seemed so remarkable. But Isla didn't push. She convinced herself it didn't matter. After all, she wasn't looking for forever. Just a break from the noise. Just a holiday fling. Or so she told herself. On the seventh night, as snow blanketed the town once again, they sat on the bench by the lake. Jack had built a tiny fire in a metal pit nearby, and they huddled together, blankets draped over their shoulders. "What happens when we leave here?" she asked softly, eyes fixed on the frozen water. Jack looked at her, his expression unreadable. "I don't know," he said after a long pause. "Maybe we don't talk about that tonight." She smiled faintly, nodding. "Deal." And then he leaned in and kissed her. Slow, certain, as if the stars themselves had whispered permission. Isla's heart skipped, and for that one moment, time seemed to pause, letting the kiss last longer than reality should allow. Snowflakes fell on his hair. Her hands curled into the collar of his coat. The kiss deepened, but remained tender, like a secret they weren't ready to share with the world. When they finally pulled away, she whispered, "I think this is the most beautiful Christmas I've ever had." Jack rested his forehead against hers. "Me too." Neither of them said what they were thinking. That soon one of them would leave, and everything would change. The fireplace in Isla's rented cottage crackled quietly, casting a warm glow across the rustic living room. Outside, the snow had turned into a soft flurry, blanketing the streets of Pinebrook in silence. Inside, Isla curled her legs beneath her on the couch, a wool blanket over her shoulders and a glass of red wine balanced in her hand. Jack was across from her, sitting on the floor near the fire, his back against the couch, head tilted up toward her. He had brought a bottle of red from the local winery, and a board game they didn't end up playing. Instead, they talked about travel, childhood holidays, favorite books, always staying just on the safe side of personal. But tonight felt different. She didn't know if it was the wine or the fire or the fact that she'd seen Jack watching her when he thought she wasn't looking. There was something behind his smile tonight, something heavy. "Can I ask you something?" she said, breaking the quiet. He looked up. "Of course. Why do you come here?" "Really?" He paused. "Same reason you do, I think. To disappear." Isla exhaled through her nose. "You said that before." "I meant it," he said. Then, after a beat, "I needed a place that didn't ask questions. Pinebrook's good at that." "You mean people like me," she teased, though her voice was gentler than usual. He smirked. "Not you. You ask more questions than most. But I like that." The air between them shifted, no longer playful but threaded with something fragile. She lowered her voice. "You seem like someone who's running from something." Jack stared into the fire, eyes flickering. "Maybe I am." A long silence settled, filled only by the popping of wood. "Tell me," she said softly. He turned slightly toward her, legs bent, arm resting on the couch beside her. "You really want to know?" Isla nodded. Jack rubbed the back of his neck, like he was weighing what he was about to share. "My family owns a tech company," he began slowly. "Big one. I was brought in early on, helped build it from the ground up. We're in the middle of a transition. New investments, big changes, and a lot of eyes watching every move I make." Isla frowned. "So you're rich?" He laughed. "I guess that's one way to put it. But it's not about the money. It's about the noise. Every room I walk into, someone's expecting something from me. I stopped knowing who I was outside of that world." She sipped her wine. "And you come here to remember?" "I come here to forget," he admitted. At least for a little while. Isla studied him. Why not just leave it behind? He shrugged. You don't walk away from something you helped build, even if it's suffocating you. A pang tugged at her chest. She hadn't expected this rawness, not from someone so confident. For a moment, he looked more boy than man, tired, conflicted, carrying a burden too big for one pair of shoulders. What about you? He asked. Where are you running from? Isla? She hesitated, then set her glass down. I got engaged last year, she said, voice flat, to someone I thought I knew. 6 months before the wedding, I found out he'd been sleeping with his co-worker. Jack's face tightened. I'm sorry. I wasn't even angry, she said. I was numb. Like part of me already knew. I just didn't want to deal with starting over. Again. Jack looked at her gently. You deserve better. She laughed bitterly. Doesn't everyone? A pause. Then he reached up, brushing a loose curl from her cheek. His fingers lingered just a second too long. You're not numb now, he said quietly. She looked into his eyes, something catching in her throat. No, she whispered. I'm not. Their faces were close now, close enough that she could see the flicker of firelight in his eyes, close enough that her heart began to race. And then, as if drawn by some magnetic pull, he leaned in and kissed her again. This kiss was different than the first. Slower, deeper. It carried something more dangerous than desire. Truth. The kind that curled around your ribs and refused to let go. Isla didn't pull away. She let herself feel it all. The warmth of his mouth, the strength of his hands as they cupped her face, the ache that told her she was teetering on the edge of something she might not be able to come back from. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. Are we making a mistake? She asked, her voice barely audible. Probably, he whispered, but it's the best one I've made in a long time. Later that night, after he left, Isla stood at her frosted window, watching the snow fall under the moonlight. She pressed her fingertips to her lips, still tingling from his kiss. It was supposed to be a fling, a moment, a breath before returning to real life. But what if, just maybe, it was something more? She didn't want to ask the question out loud. Not yet, because some things, once spoken, lose their magic. And for now, this moment still shimmered like a secret. Pine Brook's train station was quiet that morning, too quiet. The kind of hush that came after a heavy snow, when the world hadn't quite stirred awake yet. The platform was dusted in white, the tracks running like two pale scars into fog. Isla stood beneath the wooden awning, suitcase by her side, ticket clutched tightly in one gloved hand. Her breath came in slow clouds, and each one felt heavier than the last. Jack hadn't said goodbye. Not yet, at least. Their last few days together had been everything and nothing all at once, full of laughter and quiet glances, firelight dinners, kisses stolen behind pine trees. But never a talk about the end, never a plan, just moments stacked like firewood, waiting to burn. Isla had hoped he'd show up this morning. Part of her believed he would. Jack wasn't the type to just disappear. Was he? A door opened behind her. Footsteps crunched across the platform. She turned. There he was, snow in his hair, cheeks flushed, hands bare and pink from the cold. He looked like he'd run the whole way. I thought I'd missed you, he said, a little breathless. You almost did, she replied, the words catching in her throat. Jack stepped closer, eyes scanning hers like he was searching for something to hold on to. I didn't want it to end like this. Then how should it end? He didn't answer. Not right away. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. What's that? She asked. He handed it to her. Inside was a sketch. Rough pencil lines of the two of them sitting on the bench by the frozen lake, her head on his shoulder, the firelight in the background. I drew it the night before last, he said. Didn't sleep. Just kept thinking about how I wanted to remember this. Isla stared at the drawing. Her fingers trembled slightly as she held it. I don't want this to be just a memory, she said, voice thin. He nodded. Me neither. But we haven't talked about what happens now. Where do we go from here? Jack looked away. My life in the city is complicated. There are things I haven't told you yet. Not because I wanted to lie. Because I didn't want to ruin this. A dull ache formed behind her eyes. You don't trust me? It's not that. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. It's that I trust you more than I've trusted anyone in years. That's the problem. Isla wanted to ask what he meant, what he was hiding, but the train's horn wailed in the distance, low and long, slicing through the still air. She flinched. Time's up, she whispered. Jack swallowed hard. Isla. She looked at him, really looked, the way his eyes searched hers, the way he clenched his fists like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. So she spoke instead. I don't need a perfect story, Jack. I don't need all the answers. But I need honesty. I need to know I wasn't just something convenient for a few snowy days. You weren't. His voice cracked. You weren't. The train was pulling into the station now. Wheels screeching, windows fogged, lights blinking in the gray morning. Isla's heart thundered in her chest. She stepped closer, reaching up to touch his cheek. Then, tell me you'll find me, she said. After, when you figure it out. Jack pressed his forehead to hers. I will. Promise me. I promise. They kissed, slow and aching. The kind of kiss that tasted like a beginning and an ending at once. A kiss filled with everything left unsaid. When she pulled away, her eyes were glassy. He let go of her hand, and she stepped onto the train, from a window seat. Isla watched him shrink into the distance, hands buried in his coat, unmoving, a figure etched in frost. The sketch was still in her lap. She traced the lines with her fingertips. She wanted to believe his promise, wanted to believe that this wasn't just a beautiful lie told in a beautiful town. But as the train roared forward and the snow swallowed everything behind her, doubt crept in like a shadow. Was it really just a fling? Or had she fallen for a man whose life didn't have space for her? She didn't know. All she had was a kiss, a promise, and a memory. And right now, it didn't feel like enough. Boston greeted Isla with gray skies, impatient horns, and sidewalks slush with dirty snow. Gone were the gentle silences of Pine Brook and the scent of pine on the air. In their place, blinking inboxes, half-hearted coffee, and the buzz of life moving too fast. She stepped into her apartment, small, clean, and cold from a week of emptiness. The air smelled like lemon cleaning wipes and quiet resignation. Her suitcase thudded against the floor with a finality that made her flinch. She turned on the lights. Nothing had changed. Not the crooked picture frame in the hallway. Not the orchid on the windowsill, still clinging to life. Not the half-finished poem taped above her desk that once felt like a compass. And yet, everything inside her felt different. Isla unpacked slowly, methodically. She tucked the sketch Jack had given her into the top drawer of her nightstand, between a birthday card from her sister and a letter from her mother she still hadn't opened. She told herself she wasn't waiting. Not really. But days passed, then a week. Then two, and there was no call, no message, not a whispered Jack. She searched online again. Jack Whitmore. Still nothing. No LinkedIn, no social media, no tech company press releases. He was a ghost, or perhaps a mirage. Had he lied? Was it all a story built on snow and wishful thinking? She didn't want to believe that. Not with the way he'd held her, the way he'd looked at her. But the silence screamed louder with every passing day. She threw herself into routine. Emails, edits for a magazine that barely paid, coffee dates she didn't enjoy, conversations that felt like background noise. One morning, she went for a run along the Charles River. The sky was pale blue, the wind sharp. She ran harder than she should have, letting the cold air burn through her lungs, tried to chase down whatever ache lived in her chest. Back at her apartment, she collapsed onto the couch, sweat drying on her neck, and clicked on the TV for background sound. A lifestyle segment was on, something about high society winter weddings. She was halfway to changing the channel when the host said something that made her heart stop. And here's a sneak peek at Boston's tech golden boy, Jack Whitmore, proposing at the Mount Gable Gala last night. Isla froze. Her hands trembled. On screen, surrounded by fairy lights and chandeliers, was Jack. Her Jack. kneeling in front of a stunning brunette in a silver gown. His eyes were full of warmth, his smile dazzling as he held up the ring. The crowd around them erupted in applause. The woman threw her hands over her mouth, then nodded and dove into his arms. The screen cut to a smiling news anchor. Talk about a holiday romance. Rumor has it they've been together for over a year, keeping it out of the public eye. Isla's stomach dropped. She fumbled for the remote and turned off the TV. The silence that followed was deafening. She sat there for what felt like hours, staring at nothing, trying to breathe. Her heart hadn't just cracked. It had fractured clean through, the way ice does before it shatters into pieces you can never put back together. Had he been engaged the whole time? Was she the fling? The escape? No, he wouldn't do that. Not the man she'd come to know. Not the man who kissed her like she was his only reality. But the image played on loop in her mind. Jack on one knee, smiling for the cameras, his arms wrapped around someone who wasn't her. The sketch in her drawer suddenly felt like a joke. She stood up and yanked it out, stared at it, then crumpled it in her fist, and cried, for what was, for what wasn't, for what might never be. 3 days passed. She didn't eat much. She barely left the apartment. The world kept spinning, but hers felt paused in the worst way, between disbelief and betrayal, between missing him and hating herself for doing so. Then one morning, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Her heart leapt. Traitor that it was. She picked up. Isla. It was his voice. Rough. Quiet. Familiar. She didn't say anything. Jack exhaled. I saw the news. I know how it must look. But I swear to you it's not what you think. She stayed silent, fists clenched at her sides. The engagement, it's not real. It was orchestrated. My father's PR team arranged it as part of a merger, a branding partnership. I never thought they'd go through with it. I never thought they'd do that publicly without telling me. Isla's throat was dry. So, you're saying you're not getting married? No, Jack said. I'm saying I've been trying to get out of that situation for over a year. And then I met you, and everything I thought I had to do stopped making sense. Her heart twisted. Then why didn't you call? She whispered. Why let me think I was nothing? I wanted to protect you, he said. And maybe I was scared that if I reached out, I'd ruin the one honest thing I've had in years. Tears blurred her eyes. You already did. Silence stretched between them. Isla, he said finally, I'm not asking you to forgive me. Not yet. But I need you to know you were never the fling. You were the wake-up call. She didn't know what to say, so she didn't say anything. She just ended the call and stared at the wall for a long, long time. Isla hadn't touched the crumpled sketch since the phone call. It still sat on her kitchen counter, edges torn from how tightly she gripped it, a faint stain from her tea near the bottom corner. She couldn't bring herself to throw it away. Couldn't bring herself to smooth it out either. She had slept maybe 3 hours in the last 2 nights, her mind looping Jack's words, his voice, the firelight in his eyes when he'd whispered, You're not numb now. And yet, if she'd mattered, why hadn't he fought harder? Why hadn't he shown up at her door the moment the news broke? Her phone rang again. It was not Jack this time. Isla, her sister Emily said brightly. You still alive over there? You sound like you've been adopted by ghosts. I'm fine, Isla lied. Emily didn't buy it. She never did. Don't lie to a nurse. It's a reflex. You want to come stay here for a few days? Luca keeps asking about you. Her nephew, her safe place. I might, Isla said. Good. Pack a bag and show up. And if it helps, I have wine. And a new hatred for the men in suits we all fall for. Isla managed to laugh. Thanks. Later that night, with nothing left to distract her, Isla opened her laptop. She typed in Jack's company name, Whitmore Ventures. The headlines were now everywhere. Engagement photos. A quote from his father about legacy and family values. But no photo of the fiancé holding the ring. Only Jack, looking stiff in every frame, like someone trying hard not to scream. She zoomed in on his face. That wasn't the Jack who painted her with his words, who kissed her under the stars. who carved a Christmas ornament with her initials because he thought it would make her laugh. This man looked trapped, and suddenly she understood. This wasn't just about her heart. Jack hadn't ghosted her because he didn't care. He was buried under expectations, under image, under a mountain of obligation. So deep, he probably couldn't see daylight anymore. Still, it didn't make her hurt any less. But it did make her realize something. If she wanted clarity, she had to look him in the eyes, not through a TV screen. She booked a train for the next morning. The Whitmore Ventures headquarters loomed like a fortress in downtown Boston. Sleek glass panels, a private revolving door, security in stiff black suits. Isla hesitated on the sidewalk. She was in jeans and boots, hair pulled into a braid, heart beating loud in her ears. Was this insane? Probably, but she needed closure. Either way, she stepped inside. The receptionist glanced up, glossy and disinterested. "Do you have an appointment?" "I'm here to see Jack Whitmore," Isla said. The woman didn't even flinch. "I'll check if he's available." Isla waited in silence, pulse thudding. After a few tense moments, the receptionist gave a curt nod. "He's on the 28th floor. You'll be escorted." An assistant in a navy blazer appeared like magic, motioning Isla toward the private elevator. The ride-up was quiet, tense. Glass walls showed the city stretching out below, as if to remind her how far she'd come, and how far she might still fall. When the doors opened, Jack was already waiting. He looked pale, worn, and stunned. "Isla," he said softly. She stepped out, folding her arms against her chest. "You didn't expect me. I didn't know if I'd ever see you again." She looked around. Behind him was an office with glass walls, sleek furniture, and the smell of power. But Jack didn't look powerful. He looked tired. "I saw the photos," she said. "The engagement, the interviews." He exhaled slowly. "I didn't want any of it." "Then why didn't you stop it?" He closed his eyes. "Because I didn't think I could. Not until I realized what I was losing." Isla stepped closer. "And what exactly were you losing?" Jack looked at her then, really looked, like she was the only real thing in a world full of noise. "You," he said. She swallowed. "You hurt me." "I know. You made me feel like a mistake." "You weren't." His voice cracked. "You were the first right thing in a very long time." The room was quiet but full of thunder. "I can't be a secret, Jack," she said. "I can't be someone you forget every time your father calls." "You won't be," he said. "I'm done hiding. I'm ending the engagement. I've already told the board I'm stepping down as CEO." Her eyes widened. "What?" Jack nodded. "I've spent my whole life becoming someone for everyone else. I don't want that anymore. I want to start over. On my terms." Isla stared at him, and for the first time since that kiss in Pine Brook, she believed him. Still, she took a breath. "You're not saying this just because you miss me?" "I miss you more than I thought possible," he said. "But I'm saying this because I found something better than success. I found the truth in your eyes. And I want that back, if you let me earn it." Isla hesitated. Then, slowly, she reached into her bag, unfolded the sketch, smoothed it out across the glass desk between them. Jack stared down at it. "I didn't throw it away," she said. "I almost did, but I couldn't." Jack looked up at her, and in that moment, no glass walls could separate them. No titles, no expectations. Just Jack and Isla, two people who had loved in a blizzard and found their truth in the thaw. Jack never liked the cameras. He had learned to wear the mask early, at fundraisers, on red carpets, in rooms full of men who measured worth by board seats and stock options. His father called it playing the game. Jack called it selling pieces of your soul. But today, he had nothing left to sell. He stood in the grand ballroom of the Whitmore Foundation's annual Winter Gala. Same event, same people, same $1,000 smiles. But this time, everything had changed. This time, he was ending the show. The engagement announcement still echoed across media channels. Boston's most eligible bachelor finally off the market. Whitmore Airlines with future CEO of HolidayRomance. A power couple for the new decade. And yet, she wasn't here tonight. Because Jack had already broken the truth to her, in private, off camera, and with all the dignity he could muster. You deserve someone who chooses you freely, he'd said to Celeste, the woman he'd been promised to in business, but never in love. And I deserve to be free to love someone too. Celeste, to her credit, hadn't cried. Her pride ran too deep for that. She had simply adjusted her diamond bracelet, looked him in the eye, and said, "Good luck, Jack. I hope she's worth everything you're about to lose." He already knew she was. Now, as he stepped up to the mic on the gilded stage, applause burst like fireworks. The elite in gowns and tuxedos cheered, unaware of the truth coming next. Jack adjusted his cuffs, cleared his throat. "I want to thank you all for being here," he began. "This gala has always been a celebration of legacy, progress, and family." He glanced around the room. His father's eyes narrowed slightly, a warning in their glare. His mother sat stiffly, lips pressed into a thin line. Reporters leaned forward, waiting for more corporate spin. But Jack smiled, a real smile. "Tonight is different," he said, "because I'm announcing something personal. Something I should have done a long time ago." He paused. "In the past few weeks, I met someone who changed everything for me. Someone who reminded me that love isn't something you manufacture for the sake of headlines. It's something that finds you quietly, unexpectedly, and shakes the foundation beneath your feet." Whispers rippled through the room. Jack continued, "I've chosen to step down as CEO of Whitmore Ventures. I will not be moving forward with the engagement that was previously announced. And I'll be taking time away from the business world to rediscover the things that truly matter to me." A gasp, flashes, one camera dropped with a clatter, but Jack only stood taller. "I know this isn't what some of you expected, and I know it will come at a cost, but I would rather lose a company than lose the chance to live honestly, to love honestly." More murmurs. His father stood. Jack turned toward him, calm, unshaken. "I'm done, Dad." The room held its breath. Then, like a ripple on water, a few scattered claps began. From the back, from the edges, a quiet respect from those who had, perhaps, longed for a moment like this themselves. And in the crowd near the exit, Isla stood, unannounced, unnoticed by most, watching him. She hadn't known if she'd come, but the moment she heard his voice crack with truth, she knew she was exactly where she needed to be. He saw her, and for the first time, Jack smiled like a man unafraid of falling, because she was there to catch him. After the gala, the ballroom emptied in waves. The chandeliers sparkled like the last remnants of a fairy tale, and soft jazz played as a final goodbye. Jack stepped down from the stage and wove through the crowd. He found her near the side doors, framed by golden light. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said. "I almost didn't," Isla replied. "But you did." She nodded. "Because I needed to see if the man I met in Pine Brook was real or just a story I told myself to get through winter." He held her gaze. "He was real. He still is." Isla looked up at him, uncertain, hopeful. That speech, it was brave. It was true. She smiled just barely. "And what now?" Jack reached for her hand, fingers warm around hers. "Now I rewrite my story. With you, if you'll have me." There was no music then, no fanfare, just the echo of a beginning between them. And when Isla leaned into him, her head against his chest, she whispered, "Then start from page 1. And he did, right there, with a kiss that rewrote every headline. The snow was falling again, soft, quiet, full of memory. Pine Brook looked just like it had a year ago. Pine trees dusted in white, strings of golden lights draped between shops, and the scent of cinnamon and wood smoke curling in the air. But this time, Isla wasn't arriving alone. She stepped out of the rental car, gloved hand held in Jack's, the two of them wrapped in layers of warmth and something deeper, something they hadn't had before, peace. "I can't believe we made it back here," she murmured, looking around the familiar square. Jack grinned, brushing a snowflake from her cheek. "Of course we did. We promised we'd come back for the holiday lights." He wasn't in a suit this time. No reporters, no watchful eyes. Just Jack. Beanie askew, scarf half-tied, cheeks flushed from the cold. He looked freer, younger. His eyes laughed more easily now. They walked through the square slowly, passing familiar spots. The hot cocoa stand where he first bumped into her, the bookstore where they'd warmed up that night, the inn where she'd almost kissed him goodbye. The inn was decorated just like last year. Pine garlands, red ribbons, and the faint hum of Nat King Cole floating from a speaker near the door. Isla smiled. "I still remember the storm," she said. "The fireplace. The smell of your sketchbook." Jack laughed. "You fell asleep on my shoulder mid-sentence." "I was tired." "You drooled." She swatted his arm. They walked inside. Mary Ann, the innkeeper, looked up from the front desk, and her eyes widened. Well, if it isn't my Christmas lovebirds." Isla blushed. Jack beamed. "We had to come full circle," he said. "Same room." "Absolutely." Mary Ann handed them the key with a wink. "Try not to set the place on fire this time." The room hadn't changed. Still rustic. Still warm. Still holding the ghost of who they had been last year. Jack dropped their bags, then crossed the window. Outside, the snow was falling faster, dusting the branches of the pine trees like powdered sugar. "It feels like we never left," Isla said quietly. Jack turned toward her. "But we did, and we came back stronger." He walked toward her, gently pulling something from his coat pocket. Isla blinked. It was a new sketch. A snow globe. Inside it, two figures standing under a streetlight in the square, holding hands. A swirl of snowflakes all around them. She brought a hand to her mouth. "You drew this?" "I've been working on it since spring," he said softly. "It's not just memory. It's a promise." He unfolded a small note taped to the back of the sketch and read aloud. "For the girl who thawed my winter heart. Let's never be strangers again." Isla's heart squeezed. She looked at him. "I don't know what the future holds." "I do," Jack said. "It holds us, whatever form that takes." He reached into his other coat pocket, heart pounding now, breath fogging in the winter air, and pulled out a small velvet box. Isla froze. "Jack!" He didn't go down on one knee. He didn't need to. He simply held her hands in his and looked her in the eyes. "This isn't pressure. It's not about tradition or timing. It's just me asking if we can keep building something real, something honest. Whether that means engagement now or 10 years from now, I don't care. I just want to be yours." Isla stared at him, then at the ring. It was simple, elegant. A vintage gold band with a small snowflake-shaped diamond in the center. She took a breath, then nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to whatever this becomes." Jack smiled, relieved, overwhelmed, completely hers. He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit like it had been waiting for her. Then he kissed her. And outside in the swirling snow, Pinebrook's lights twinkled to life. Strings of gold and silver and soft red, blinking like stars. Their love had begun as a flicker in a blizzard. Now it glowed, steady, unshakable. Home. The first signs of spring came quietly. A robin song outside their Boston apartment window. The last stubborn piles of snow melting into cobbled gutters. Daffodils pushing up defiantly through frost-licked soil. And inside their home, sunlight spilled across pages of an open sketchbook. Isla sat on the floor, legs tucked beneath her, thumbing through Jack's newest illustrations. She paused on one of her favorites, a watercolor at the bookstore in Pinebrook, done from memory. Above the door, he penciled in a small sign that read where Chapter 1 began. "Are you going to frame this one?" she called out. Jack appeared in the doorway, 2 mugs in hand. "Only if it goes right beside your first article for the North Shore Monthly." She flushed. After everything that happened, the proposal, the return to Pinebrook, the storm they weathered together, Isla had finally submitted her writing samples. And to her surprise, the local arts editor had not only replied, but asked her to contribute a monthly column. They titled it Second Chances. Jack handed her a mug and sat beside her on the hardwood floor, their backs against the couch, shoulders brushing. "You nervous about the next piece?" he asked. "Kind of," she admitted. I'm trying to write about us. Without writing about us, you know? Jack took a sip. Write what's real. That's what makes people listen. She smiled over the rim of her mug. When did you get so wise? About 5 minutes after falling in love with you, he teased. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the city humming softly outside their window. Isla's phone buzzed on the coffee table. A message from Emily. Luca just asked if Aunt Isla is still with her winter prince. She chuckled and passed the phone to Jack. He grinned. Winter prince. I like that. You'd better. That's what he's calling you on FaceTime now. Should I get him a snow-themed crown? Only if you make one for yourself, too. Jack nudged her with his shoulder. What about a spring prince now? I've evolved. They laughed, the kind of laughter that echoed from somewhere deeper than humor. It came from healing, from surviving something that had almost broken them. Later that week, Isla walked to her favorite cafe on Tremont, bundled in a light jacket and scarf, the wind carrying that unmistakable scent of new beginnings. Earth reigned, the faint perfume of flowers just starting to bloom. She settled by the window and opened her laptop. The blank page stared back at her. She typed the first sentence. Sometimes we think the story ends when the season changes. But love, if it's real, finds a way to bloom again, even when the winter felt like forever. She stared at the words. Her heartbeat slowed. Her hands steadied. And she kept writing. Back at the apartment, Jack was organizing a set of canvases in the spare room. They converted into a shared creative studio. He paused to hang the pine brick sketch, now framed in dark wood. Below it, a small brass plate read, "The night everything changed." On the shelf beside it, nestled between Isla's books and Jack's pencils, sat a snow globe. Not store-bought, hand-carved. There are two tiny figures under a lamppost, holding hands in the snow. He shook it gently. The flurry swirled around them. Still caught in that magic. Still home. And in that quiet moment, Jack realized something. For all the headlines he'd ever made, all the rooms he'd ever commanded, their apartment, her laughter, the soft scratch of her pen across paper, this was the only legacy he ever wanted. Not power, not profit, but love that lingered. Love that rewrote winter. Love that bloomed, unshaken, into spring. The envelope arrived on a quiet Tuesday. Cream-colored, embossed, with a deep navy wax seal stamped with the letter W. Jack found it on the doormat when he returned from the art co-op he'd been volunteering at. He bent to pick it up, pausing when he recognized the seal. Whitmore, his old world. Just when he thought he'd finally buried it, he turned the envelope in his hands. It wasn't threatening. It wasn't cold. It was elegant and carefully addressed. Mr. Jack Whitmore and Ms. Isla Ramsey. Curious. He walked inside and sat on the counter just as Isla entered the kitchen with a towel slung over her shoulder. Anything interesting in the mail? He held it up. Her brow rose. Fancy. For my cousin Sophia. We used to be close. She's getting married in the summer, apparently. Isla dried her hands. Are we invited? Jack peeled open the seal. Inside, a letter in flowing script. Dearest Jack, I don't know if you'll come. I won't pretend things haven't changed. But I've watched from a distance as you became someone you were always meant to be. If you feel ready, I would be honored if you and Isla came to the wedding. No cameras, no pressure, just family and a chance to heal the past. With love, Sophia. Jack exhaled slowly. He looked at Isla. She was one of the few who didn't just see me as the heir. She saw the kid who liked sketching trees and hated gala shoes. Isla smiled softly. She sounds like someone worth knowing again. He studied her. Would you want to go? It'll be upstate. A big estate wedding. Probably a little ridiculous. She raised an eyebrow. I once dated a man who proposed to someone else on national television. I think I can survive a Whitmore wedding. They both laughed. But beneath the humor was something unspoken. Growth. 1 year ago, they were running from brokenness, from fame, from fear. Now, they were walking back into the world. Together. The wedding venue was tucked in the Hudson Valley, wrapped in green hills and golden light. Jack and Isla arrived the night before the ceremony, checked into the guest cottages, and spent the evening wandering the gardens beneath a starlit sky. It felt surreal, like stepping back into a palace Jack once ruled but no longer belonged to. He didn't wear a tux, just a dark navy suit and no tie. Isla wore a flowing slate blue dress that caught the wind like a secret. The next morning, Sophia found them near the orchard path. She looked older, wiser, more grounded, but her hug was just as warm. "I'm glad you came," she said, holding Jack's face like a brother. "And I'm glad you brought the woman who finally cracked that frozen heart of yours." Isla laughed, only slightly frozen. Sophia turned to her, eyes full of warmth. "You're the best thing to happen to him. Thank you." And for the first time in a long while, Jack didn't feel like a disappointment to his bloodline. He felt seen. The ceremony was held at golden hour. Rows of wooden chairs beneath old oak trees. Strings of fairy lights above. No paparazzi. No billion-dollar contracts. Just tears, laughter, and promises. And as the couple said their vows, Jack held Isla's hand. "Remember when we didn't believe in this stuff?" he whispered. "I never said that," Isla replied. "I said I didn't believe in performative love." "Fair," he said, grinning. "But this feels like what love should look like." She looked over at him. "That's because it's real. No scripts, no saving face." They watched Sophia kiss her groom to the sound of cheers and violins. And for the first time, Jack didn't feel like a man who had escaped a world. He felt like a man who had returned on his own terms. Later, at the reception, as laughter filled the tent and candles flickered across every table, Isla placed a hand over Jack's. "You were brave," she said. He turned to her. "Last year, on that stage," she continued, "you walked away from a life everyone expected you to cling to. And somehow, you found something better." Jack kissed the top of her hand. "I didn't find it. I followed it. All the way to Pinebrook. All the way to you." The band began playing an old jazz tune. Jack stood and offered her his hand. "Dance with me, Isla Ramsey, even if I step on your toes." She rose, laughing. "Only if you promise not to spin me into the dessert table." And there, under the stars and the memory of all they'd overcome, they danced. Slowly, closely, not as strangers from different worlds, not as a holiday fling, but as two people who had chosen each other, again and again. It started where it ended. Or maybe it ended where it began. A year to the day since their first snowfall together, Jack and Isla returned to the hill above Pinebrook, where the lights of the town blinked below like a pocket full of stars. Jack had brought a blanket, thermos of cocoa, and a small Bluetooth speaker playing soft jazz in the background. Isla brought her old journal, the one she had been writing in the days she met him. They sat together, bundled up, their breath fogging in the crisp December air. "Do you ever rewind it in your head?" Isla asked, eyes on the twinkling town. "All the time," Jack said. "Especially the way you looked at me when you thought I was just some lost tourist with too much cocoa in his hands." She laughed. "You were the most confusing man I'd ever met. And you were the most honest woman I'd ever met." She rested her head against his shoulder. "I used to think it was just a moment, a spark. But now I know it was the start of everything." Jack pulled something from his coat pocket. Not a ring, not a gift, a flash drive. "What's this?" "My latest project," he said. "A short animation I've been working on, based on a true story." He connected it to a tiny projector and aimed it at a portable white screen. As the image flickered to life, Isla recognized the opening shot. Two figures standing in the snow, bumping into each other at a cocoa stand. Her eyes widened. "You animated us?" "I wanted to remember it. All of it, even the messy parts. Maybe especially the messy parts." The short film played without dialogue, just soft music and carefully sketched scenes. The bookstore, the storm, the night on the inn's couch, the TV proposal, the heartbreak, the return. Frame by frame, their love rewound and played again. By the end, Isla was crying. Jack wiped her cheek. "I didn't want to lose the story. Not the one the world saw on screen. The real one." She nodded, barely able to speak. "I was afraid," she said finally. When I saw you on that stage, I thought he chose her. He chose a version of himself the world expects. Jack took her hand. I was afraid too, but that night broke something open in me. I realized I didn't want a legacy made of headlines. I wanted a life made of quiet moments. Like this one. The wind stirred. Snowflakes floated down like whispers. You know what the best part of rewinding is? Isla asked, turning to him. You see how far you've come. He leaned in, forehead to hers. And how much you don't want to go back. She kissed him, long, slow, certain, and then they just sat there, watching the town, watching the past fade behind them. That New Year's Eve, Isla's column ran a piece titled Love and Rewind. We think love is supposed to arrive loudly, through grand gestures and perfect timing. But sometimes it sneaks in like snowfall, soft, unnoticed at first, and only when we rewind do we see how every falling flake led to something permanent, something pure. Love doesn't need a stage, just a moment, a pause, a second chance. They didn't need another proposal. They didn't need to be defined by what had happened on live television. They found their real beginning in quiet places, in bookstores in snowfall, in second chances and silent apologies, and in each other. Love, they learned, isn't something you lose once and get over. It's something you keep finding again and again, even in rewind, even in winter, especially in winter. This was a Stories Box exclusive. Subscribe to follow our stories. Till next time, thank you for watching.